Hi everybody, today we're going to be talking about connecting an ImmersionRC 5.8 GHz audio video transmitter to a Phantom 2 quadcopter with a GoPro Hero 3 and Zenmuse gimbal mounting. This will be mounted externally and it'll be nice and tidy. It makes a pretty neat package. Some of the tools you'll need are a set of wire cutters, a sharp knife and maybe a screwdriver, a heat gun, and a soldering iron. You'll also need some braided shielding cable and some heat shrink tubing. And of course, the actual RC transmitter. The cable you'll be using on the actual quadcopter is already there. It's tucked away behind the wire that connects to the gimbal, and it's the brown, red, brown, yellow wire or ribbon cable. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to split them down the little tracks between the wire so that you can pull them apart. You want to be careful not to actually cut the wire when you do this, just pull them apart very carefully. When you're finished, the wire should be all taken apart and ready for stripping. Now you can do this with a sharp knife or you can do it with a set of cutters if you're handy. And again, you've got to be careful not to cut the copper underneath, just take off the insulation on the outside. We're getting it ready to solder. So now all four are stripped and ready for soldering. This process is called tinning the wire or putting some solder on the ends, ready to connect it to the other wires later on. If you've never used a soldering iron, you may want to ask a friend or get somebody else to do it for you, but it's pretty easy. Add some solder to the iron, touch the iron to the wire, and add a little bit more solder so that you get the whole thing covered. Taking a look at all the stuff that came with the actual transmitter, you have an antenna. It screws into the little receptacle. You also have two wiring harnesses. One is for signal and the other one is for power. And we're not going to be using all of the wires because some of the wires just don't work or aren't needed for the signals from the GoPro. The powering harness also came with a little end on the other side to connect to whatever it's supposed to connect to, but we're actually going to cut the wires a lot shorter, so I wouldn't worry about that right now. We're just going to cut the wires probably about 3 or 4 inches and maybe even shorten them up a bit later as well. So if you look on the connector itself, it's pretty clearly labeled. You'll see that it's got 2 audio inputs and audio right and an audio left. It's got a video input, a ground, and a 5-volt out to power something else, but it's not connected to anything. The ground and the battery connection are on the other connector, and that will be supplied by the actual quadcopter. So what we're going to do is we're going to strip off the ends of the wire, much like we did with the cable that came out of the copter, and it's the same thing, just pull them apart. Again, being careful not to actually nick the wire, and we'll be tinning these with a soldering iron as well. We're going to get rid of some of the unused wires. The red wire, which is the 5 volts out, which is useless, we're going to get rid of that. We need the ground and we need the video, and the 2 audio wires or signal inputs are useless because there's no audio output or no usable audio output from the copter. And I'm going to trim these a little bit shorter as well. Now we're going to do exactly the same as what we did with the wires coming out of the copter. We're going to strip off the insulation, again being careful not to cut the wire underneath, and then we're going to apply some solder to tin the ends. We're now going to try and solder the 2 components together, but before we do that, we want to plan for covering the wires, both with the shielding, the braided shielding, as well as the heat shrink tubing, that'll stop the connectors from touching each other. And those have to be slipped on before you actually do the soldering. What we'll need are 2 large pieces of heat shrink tubing, 4 small ones that'll cover the wires, and a piece of this braided shield. The braided shield just makes the whole thing a little bit neater, and so what we'll do is first put on the thicker or the larger heat shrink tubing, and that's going to hold the braided cable. So that goes on first and gets pushed all the way up to the end. Now you put on the braided shield, and it's a little bit of a tricky thing because the wires always catch, but you just wiggle it all the way up. And then the final part, the tricky part, is to get all those loose ends, those frayed ends, inside. Make sure they're inside the heat shrink tubing so that when you heat the tubing, it'll hold those ends nicely together. So just wiggle it and eventually you'll do it. And once you've got it, push it all the way up. This is where we apply the heat from the heat gun, and I'm going to use the high setting on the heat gun so we can do this quickly. I don't want to have a lot of heat on the actual cable. And just give it a second to cool down, and there you go, nice and tight, much stronger and much neater. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side, on the copter side. We're going to put the bigger collar for the braided shield first, and it goes all the way to the end. And then we're going to put the actual smaller individual wire covers, the heat shrink tubing, on each one of them. So we're going to pull these a little bit further apart, and then cover each of those wires with the heat shrink tubing, keeping them well away from the end so that they don't shrink prematurely when you solder. Now, in order to get to the ends of the wire, you're going to have to bunch up the braided shield. It's a little bit tricky, but it rolls up quite nicely. And you want to try and not fray the ends of the shielding as much as possible. If you do, it's okay. It's going to get tucked under the cover anyway. But once you have it, just pull the wires, pull the shielding back, and you'll have enough of a purchase that you can actually work with them. So it's finally time to solder everything together. The 2 yellow wires get soldered to each other. The 2 red wires get soldered to each other. And the black wires from the transmitter get connected to the brown wires from the quadcopter. I don't think it makes a real difference which brown wire goes to which black wire. They're all ground. Once you've got everything soldered together, it's time to heat everything up and cover them up with the heat shrink tubing, and once again use the heat gun to shrink all the tubing so that you cover the solder joints quite nicely. The final piece is to cover the whole thing with the shielded braiding, or the braided shielding, and the hard part now is to tuck all those loose ends inside the bigger collar that we had slipped on previously. And again, it's just a matter of time and finessing it and wiggling it. And once you have it on, make sure all the fibers are in and apply the heat gun. This time you want to be careful that you actually don't overheat the plastic body, and so make sure you're pointing the heat gun in a way that doesn't overheat the quadcopter as well. It doesn't need a lot of time, just a little bit. The final step is to mount it, and so to do that I'm going to use this VHB very high bonding tape from 3M. It works really, really well, and I haven't seen one come loose yet. The one thing you do want to note is that on the transmitter itself are some switches that are used to set the frequency, and you want to make sure you mount it with those switches to the outside, not underneath, so that you can adjust them later if you have to, if you get any interference. So what you're going to do is you're going to peel one end of it, stick it to the transmitter, and then once you've done that, you will stick it to the body of the actual Phantom 2. Once you have it ready to stick, you want to be pretty careful where you put it, because when that tape sticks, it sticks pretty hard and you're not going to be able to get it off. And so be careful, line it up nicely, and then just push it down and apply a little bit of pressure for a short amount of time. And the very last step is to tuck the leftover cable, the excess cable, back inside the body of the Phantom 2. And all you have to do is just wiggle a little bit, and again, a little bit of finesse. What you want to do is get it so that the braided shield is what comes out of the body. It's a nice tidy package, and the antenna sticks out the side, giving you plenty of signal for your receiver on the ground. Now it's time to go fly.